Their thyroid's important. They need to know their options before having something that's going to affect the rest of their lives.
It is an important gland. So many people don't even realize how important it is until something starts to go wrong with it.
After I did traditional endocrinology training, I went into a hospital-based practice, and I was seeing more and more that we weren't really fixing the problem. They weren't feeling any better. I was getting frustrated, and then that's when I found the world of integrative medicine. And I found that for a lot of thyroid issues, integrative medicine is really the best treatment option. We get the best success from a patient standpoint as well as results standpoint.
It does take the patient being motivated, but what I'm seeing today is that patients are more motivated than ever. Welcome to Save Your Thyroid, a podcast all about thyroid nodules. My name is Jennifer Holcomb, and I advocate for fellow patients suffering with this very common condition. Thyroid nodules impact 70% of adults in their lifetime, and the standard of care is surgical removal of half or all of the gland. But in recent years, safe and effective non-surgical treatment options have become available. In this podcast, I sit down with patients and physicians to discuss life with thyroid nodules, treatment options, and how to save the thyroid whenever possible. Today, I have the pleasure of reintroducing a previous guest on the podcast, Dr. Angela Mazza, an integrative endocrinologist practicing in Oviedo, Florida. She is triple board certified in endocrinology, diabetes and metabolism, internal medicine, anti-aging and regenerative medicine. A pivotal moment in her career was realizing that traditional medicine often missed the nuances of thyroid conditions. Embracing integrative medicine as the solution, she founded her practice, the Metabolic Center for Wellness, offering specialized holistic care. Renowned for her individualized approach, Dr. Mazza empowers patients through education and lifestyle management. In our previous conversation, we discussed radiofrequency ablation, thyroid-sparing non-surgical treatment option for thyroid nodules that she began offering to her patients in 2021. In today's discussion, we will cover the topic of endocrine disrupting chemicals and how these toxins play a significant role in the development of thyroid nodules and disease. Dr. Mazza, it's great to see you again. Welcome back to the podcast.
Oh, it's great to see you too, Jen. Thank you so much for that kind introduction.
Well, it's been about 2 years since we recorded that last episode. Tell me how things are going with your practice since then. Are you doing lots of RFAs and seeing lots of patients with thyroid nodules?
We are continually seeing patients with thyroid nodules and doing lots of thyroid biopsies and doing more and more ablations, especially radiofrequency ablations or RFAs on a regular basis. We're currently the only center in Central Florida. We have patients coming from all over. Thanks to your help, we're still trying to educate other physicians and providers. With some steady progress, it takes time. Change is hard.
Exactly.
But this has been very patient-driven. As we were talking earlier, I would have to say the majority of my patients that are coming for RFA consults and RFAs have found information from your website and all the hard work you're doing. So you're really spreading the word of this important procedure. So I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. You know, the Save Your Thyroid community has grown to over 8,000 members.
Amazing.
I never expected it to get to that size, and I'm grateful that there's people being helped by that effort. So thank you so much for that.
You're doing great work, and you're helping people realize that their thyroid's important and they need to know their options before having something that's going to affect the rest of their lives.
It is an important gland, and I think so many people don't even realize how important it is until something starts to go wrong with it, which is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. So, and a bit later in the episode, we're going to talk about something very exciting, your new book. Been such a great read. Your new book is going to be such a wonderful educational resource for patients, many of whom are struggling with their thyroid health, including thyroid nodules, and need guidance from a trusted resource as they seek to educate themselves on what can be a very confusing and daunting and overwhelming journey.
Oh, for sure.
But before we get into that, for anyone who's unfamiliar with you, Dr. Mazza, I'd like to talk a little bit about your medical background. You have a very unique background, being that you are an integrative endocrinologist. That's something that a lot of people are looking for today. People want a physician who's going to take a more holistic approach to medicine. So, which is what you're doing as an integrative endocrinologist. So can you tell us more about what that means?
Kind of circling back to the background first, because that kind of plays a part in my journey to becoming an integrative endocrinologist. I went into osteopathic medical school because I was always interested in whole body wellness because um, that was just always my passion. And then when I went into my training, I found the world of hormones. So endocrinology became my sphere of focus, rather, because hormones are really the chemical messengers that deliver signals to all over our body. So it's very kind of whole body in and of itself. So that's the thyroid, which we're going to talk about a little bit more, female hormones, male hormones, growth hormones, cortisol. So all these hormones work in concert together. After I did traditional endocrinology training, I went into a hospital based practice. There, I was treating patients on a regular basis, and I was seeing more and more that we weren't really fixing the problem.
Right.
Patients were coming in, they weren't feeling any better. I would see, hey, their thyroid numbers are perfect. They should feel perfect, but they didn't feel perfect. Some patients did great. I mean, they smooth sailing, but I was getting the more and more complicated patients. They just weren't getting better. I was getting frustrated. And then that's when I found the world of integrative medicine. So, and that became the basis of our clinic here, Metabolic Center for Wellness. So, integrative medicine is really a combination of traditional medicine. So, traditional medicine really kind of just treats the symptoms. So, for an example, that's like treating someone with diabetes and just giving them a medicine, but not really looking at diet and lifestyle. Functional medicine is kind of the other scope. So, functional medicine is holistic medicine at its very core. So, it really looks at finding the root cause of disease. And it's not so much a looking at one particular symptom, it's looking at the whole picture. Traditional medicine has its drawbacks. Functional medicine can take a long time, and it doesn't always completely resolve symptoms. It's a lot of patient effort. It can be a long process. Integrative medicine is really a combination of both traditional and functional medicine. And I found that for a lot of thyroid issues, integrative medicine is really the best treatment option, and we get the best success from a patient standpoint as well as result standpoint.
That is so awesome. And I think you are exactly right. It does take the patient being motivated. But what I'm seeing today is that patients are more motivated than ever
I
because they're
believe that,
so
yes.
frustrated with what they're dealing with. So I think it's so awesome that that is what you're doing in your approach, and that that's becoming kind of more of the patient's mindset to really get to the root of the problem. So
Exactly.
I think that's awesome that you're doing that. And I think it's awesome that you also are educating people through your podcast, Thyroid Talk, which I'm going to link in the description of this episode below. And it was really wonderful to join you on a recent episode.
We had a great time. Thank you so much.
Yes, I had a wonderful time too. Tell us about how the podcast is going and what the response has been.
As I always say in the intro of our podcast, our goal is to define and demystify the thyroid and thyroid related medical conditions. So we really try to provide information in an easy to understand format, because some of this can be very complicated, very like over your head if you're not listening to it on a regular basis. So this podcast was a very grassroots kind of thing. We're 25 episodes in now. We really make it as fun as possible and very conversational, because me and my co-host, Dawn Sheffield, she's not only my friend, but she is actually also a real thyroid patient with dealing with real thyroid issues. So we were having a conversation one day, and all of our conversations would start on one track and then delve into some crazy conversation where we end up laughing. So we're trying to make this podcast a lot about that too. But still empower our patients and our listeners with reliable, research-driven information, because there's a lot of misinformation out there and can be very confusing and misleading. So, and we're always open to our listener feedback. We're always asking, please send in your questions, because we want to answer your questions and maybe have a future episode on it, because we've covered not just thyroid issues, we've covered exercise, we've covered stress, we've had compounding pharmacists come visit with us. We're running the gamut and kind of trying to cover issues that people want to hear about. And that's kind of the start of the podcast, is when my book started coming into play too. So it all happened very organically.
I think that it makes sense that you would start off with something where you're meeting a need, and then you realize, oh my goodness, there's so much more here than what I realized. And so the growth there into your, from your podcast into your book, it just makes complete sense to me. So I'm very excited about the book. We're going to talk more about that later in the episode. But first, We're going to talk about our topic of the day, which is endocrine disruptors, which you go into detail about in your book in chapter 6. What are thyroid disruptors and how can we avoid them? Which
Sounds scary.
honestly, it seems like a daunting task if you really think about it. But we need to be aware of these toxins because they can really wreak havoc on our thyroid health. So in this chapter, you mentioned that we're exposed on a daily basis to over 85,000 artificial chemicals.
Crazy.
That's just mind-boggling.
It's crazy. Yeah.
And then out of those, only 1% have actually been studied for safety. How is that even possible?
It's mind-boggling, right?
We need to talk about what the main endocrine disruptors are that people are exposed to on a daily basis. So, Dr. Mazza, start off by just telling us, generally speaking, what an endocrine disruptor is.
Well, first, it's important to note that the really thyroid hormone affects every aspect of our health. That you'd be hard pressed to find one system in our body that is not affected by thyroid hormone. And it's a very complicated process to make thyroid hormone and for thyroid hormone to do what it needs to do, because there's lots of steps along the way. And the thyroid then has to be able to get to the cell, and actually it works off of a nuclear receptor. So that involves gene transcription, either activation or deactivation. So it's a very complicated process because thyroid hormone controls everything metabolism related. So metabolism isn't just like the nutrients we take in and how we use them, which I think that's kind of what people think of when they think of metabolism. It's like burning energy.
Right.
These are like the countless enzyme reactions that happen in our body that make it possible to live. And that in turn affects how we feel too. So the problem is these thyroid disruptors can affect any process along the way the thyroid makes thyroid hormone. It takes up iodine to make thyroid hormone, and that thyroid hormone actually gets to the cells and does the job that it needs. As a result, it really just impairs our thyroid from working its best. But, what's it going to mean to the common person? How's it going to affect us? Well, it means you aren't probably going to feel your best sometimes. You could feel fatigued, have brain fog, have weight issues, have skin and hair issues. In the long term, you could have potential cardiac and metabolic issues. So it does really mean a lot to really help our body be able to handle these endocrine disruptors as much as we can, because they can in turn affect your quality of life.
Definitely. Yeah. Just a little side note about endocrine disruptors in my own experience. We renovated our previous home right before we put it on the market. And so I was doing a lot of painting. I was sanding, doing all kinds of work with chemicals, and I was exposed to them, getting them on my skin. And I remember after that project was over, I just felt like trash. And I thought, okay, why do I still feel so bad? I've rested, I've, recovered from the extra work that I was doing. Why am I feeling so bad? And I think it was because of all of those chemicals that I was absorbing into my system.
Our body has a limit of how much we can tolerate. And when we hit that tipping point, it's like the toxins are kind of running the show.
The burden is too much.
Right.
Just knowing more about these chemicals and how many problems they cause makes it clearer that we need to know what they are and remove or limit our exposure to them, which can seem daunting. But tell us, Dr. Mazza, some good practical steps we can take to avoid some of the very worst offenders and what some of these chemicals are and what good substitutions might be.
Before we get started, I just want to say you can't avoid all of them.
No.
You have to live in a bubble, and it can be overwhelming to think about all of them. But there are steps that we're going to talk about that are in our power to limit our exposure and to help our body handle them more. So
absolutely. We want to empower people, not overwhelm them.
Exactly, because then that leads to stress, and stress is a whole nother ballgame.
No, we don't want more stress.
I guess probably the big one to start with is our BPAs or bisphenol A's. So that's what you hear about in plastic bottles and the lining of aluminum cans. So these bad guys can really affect that gene transcription at the level of the cell that I was talking about. So we need that gene transcription to perform all the actions that different cells in our bodies do. That really is the key to what thyroid hormone does. Probably the best thing is to limit your exposure. So rather than a plastic bottle, kind of maybe go for a glass bottle that you can reuse or metal. So again, can't avoid all of it, but if you can at least do that, you're doing your part.
What about the cookware we're using? What about coatings on our cookware?
So they fall into like the PFA. So that's the
Mm.
nonstick cookware. And then that always brings us into the topic of PFO. So that's like the stain resistant carpets and stain resistant fabrics. So the research that we do have on these chemicals is that probably our exposure is pretty low, but even low levels of this can decrease T4 production. So T4 is our main thyroid hormone that gets converted to T3. So for the PFAs and the non-stick cookware, I'd recommend if you can change to ceramic or iron skills because then that's going to be better for you as far as avoiding those PFAs. Now, as far as PFOs, there's like a ton of them out there that companies now that are making fabrics that are PFO free and they'll say PFO free. So there's a bunch of companies. There's outerwear companies like Jack Wolfskin and Marma. H&M has certain products that are PFO free and even LL Bean. So you can actually there's a central website that lists all these and updates them on a regular basis.
I didn't even think about the water resistant fabrics until we were preparing for
Yeah,
this interview. And I thought, man, that can be for some people who wear those kinds of fabrics on a daily basis, maybe for
all
their
the
job,
time.
that makes a big impact on their health. So knowing that is so helpful. Fluoride. And
Yes.
with fluoride, for me, where we live, our water is fluoridated.
Ah, okay.
And for a lot of people, their water is fluoridated if they're drinking tap water. And tell us why fluoride is such a big problem.
I grew up in Delaware and the water was fluoridated there. And every time I go to the dentist now, they ask me, "Do you want a fluoride treatment?" I'm like, they've stopped asking me now. So,
Right.
but really, fluoride's going to affect how our body oxidizes and takes up iodine. So the thyroid takes up iodine in our dietary intake and it oxidizes it or converts it to iodine within the thyroid, and that in turn gets incorporated into thyroid hormone. So iodine itself is kind of the essential building block for thyroid hormone.
Right.
We need about 100 to 250 micrograms a day. So pregnant women, breastfeeding women need more. On the other hand, not everybody should take extra iodine. So I just want a word of warning on that. So don't take extra iodine unless you need it. But we do need iodine. We do need that to make thyroid hormone. And the scary thing is, if we look back in the medical literature, fluoride was actually used as a treatment for hyperthyroidism because it shut down thyroid hormone production. So if you kind of put that into kind of, whoa, we're fluoridating our water.
Yeah.
It's used for thyroid to shut down thyroid function. It does make it a
Yeah.
little scary,
Just to know that information is like, what are we
disturbing.
doing?
I know. And again,
Mm.
it's like if we can limit our exposure as much as possible. I mean,
Hmm.
a number of people have had distillation units put into their house to
Hmm.
help with filtering, but even just getting a regular water filter will help out and just avoiding those dental applications of fluoride.
Hmm.
That's a step in the right direction. And again, there's another website that's really good for that called fluoridealert.org. And that'll tell you if where you live, if they're fluoridating their water.
I was very disappointed to learn that our water was fluoridated here because where we lived previously, which was just a few miles up the road in the other part of this county, our water was not fluoridated there. I had been drinking tap water since we moved here because we got a nice new refrigerator with the little water dispenser in the
Oh
door.
yeah.
And so, I was drinking all my water. And when I learned that, I thought, oh no, because I actually had an allergic reaction to a fluoride based drug. So in the beginning of my journey, I took some antibiotics for a UTI, and it caused this nodule to just basically hemorrhage into itself. It grew almost by double over the course of just a couple of days. And so since then, I have removed as much fluoride as I possibly can. I go to the dentist. I tell them I don't want the fluoride, when you clean my teeth. I was very disappointed to learn that my water was fluoridated. And as a result, we started buying water in water bottles because I didn't know what type of filter would be best. And so I was curious, do you have a recommendation of a good type of water filtration system to pull the fluoride out of your tap water?
Yeah, so these reverse osmosis kind of filters, they really just kind of it's a semi-permeable they have a semi-permeable barrier that forces water through and it kind of takes out the contaminants as it does it. So there are a number of like really good companies doing a little research and just talking around. And the one that we use is APEC, APEC. So
Okay.
it's a little bit of an investment, but
Oh,
I would
definitely.
but it's also an investment in your health. So
Definitely. And that's why I want to make sure that we do that in the long run.
mhm.
Okay, so this next one on our list is one that I was not familiar with, and it's cadmium. Tell us
Yeah,
about cadmium.
this is a big one. I think this is actually one of the scarier ones
Really?
because it's really found naturally, but it's a pollutant. And the thing about cadmium is it accumulates in our tissues.
Ooh.
So it can accumulate in our liver, kidney, muscle. It can even accumulate in bone and thyroid. So, and it
Mm,
stays there. It's tough to get out.
okay.
So we know that cadmium is found in tobacco. Again, another reason not to smoke or quit smoking. Please quit
Mhm,
smoking if you are.
mhm,
But it's found in tap water, processed foods. Although it's been found to be associated with thyroid nodules and thyroid cancer, the main issue with cadmium is it depletes our selenium stores. So
mhm,
selenium is, I always call it, it's our thyroid micronutrient superstar because selenium is important in a number of steps in thyroid hormone production. So
mhm.
selenium is important to the enzyme that makes thyroid hormone, as well as the enzymes that convert T4 to T3. But
Right.
the other thing about selenium, it protects the thyroid. So thyroid hormone, its production itself is what we call an oxidative process or an inflammatory process. So selenium really helps protect the thyroid from the inflammatory process that it's doing on a regular basis. So that's why selenium is so important. If we have depleted stores, we know that there's an increased risk of developing thyroid autoimmune disease.
Yeah, and that's something we do not want, and it's so common today, unfortunately.
Up to 20 million people
My
have
goodness.
thyroid disease. So some of it's going to be thyroid nodules, some of it's going to be
Mhm.
autoimmune. Autoimmune disease in general, there's like up to 80 million adults. And I think that's on the
Yeah.
rise.
Yeah, so we got to keep our selenium in there and
Selenium
not
superstar.
right. This one is going to be one that a lot of people are like annoyed by, but
I know.
pesticides. Tell us about how pesticides can be a problem.
So pesticides are going to interfere with that gene transcription on the cellular end that we talked about
Mhm.
before, as well as iodine uptake. We can't get away from everything. I mean, with
Right.
pesticides on like a yard and stuff, I think if you can get away from pesticides, great. I don't. Some people don't have a choice because they don't control what the lawns are being kept with. But
Mhm.
at least take your shoes off when you get in the house, and even
Mhm.
be careful with your little furry friends. It's not the pesticides aren't good for them. Plus,
Yeah.
they can bring them into the house too. So just maybe wipe off their little paws. And buy organic. So fruits and veggies sometimes will carry some pesticide residue. So buy
Mhm.
organic when you can. We talk about the dirty dozen a lot. So dirty dozen is a list of fruits and vegetables that have the highest level of pesticide residues. And that's kind of a list done by the Environmental Working Group or the EWG. The EWG does great work on educating the public on the safety of this. So the dirty dozen, they'll have like strawberries, grapes, cherries, but they'll constantly change it a little bit. But the
Mhm.
EWG is a great resource when it comes to this.
Another thing that they're great about showing people is about your cosmetics and your personal care products,
Yes,
clean or
yes,
dirty
they're great.
those are. I think for women, especially, we use a lot of products, you name it, we're putting it on our bodies. And I read somewhere years ago that when you put something onto your skin within, I want to say it was 6 seconds, the chemicals from that product are already in your bloodstream. And so it's very important to pick clean personal care products. So the number one that I have switched in light of our previous topic we were just discussing with fluoride is toothpaste. I have switched to a different kind of toothpaste. It's actually not a toothpaste, it's a tooth powder.
Well, the tooth
It
powders
does
are
not,
great.
yeah, it does not have any fluoride in it. I really love this one particular brand. It's called Van Man. And I'm going to put a link for that in the description because they're actually an affiliate and support this podcast. I originally bought it just on kind of a whim. This one
Mhm.
was advertised as having eggshell as the main ingredient, ground up eggshells. It
Oh,
had an ingredient called hydroxyapatite, which is supposed to remineralize the tooth surface. Didn't have any fluoride. So I bought it, I tried it, and I was like, okay, this is interesting. My teeth feel really clean. Then one morning, my daughter comes in the bathroom and she's like, where's the toothpaste? I said, it's in that little jar, that little powder.
mhm.
She tried it. She said, this is weird. But she kept using it without me having, told
Well,
her
that's the true test.
that she should use it. And I thought, well, that's crazy because it's not sweet. Most toothpaste is sweet, and she's 13. Then my husband starts using it, and now the three of us are using it and love it. And I'm really shocked by, just how
I'll have
they
to
all
check it
adopted
out.
it on their own. So the only one that's not using it is my 7-year-old, but she's a little bit picky about that sort of thing. But she also uses a fluoride-free toothpaste as well. When it comes to other personal care products, do you want to talk about like deodorant or cosmetics or anything like that?
Oh, sure. I mean, the big one that comes with deodorant, now that we have more options, is the deodorant that has aluminum in it. So
Mm-hmm.
that's also going to interfere with iodine uptake and the overall thyroid hormone production.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an easy one. There's lots of great options now as far as
Yeah.
aluminum-free deodorant. And, we didn't talk about parabens, but parabens are a lot of cosmetics and shampoos. And
Mm-hmm.
there's definitely a link between parabens and changes in the thyroid. So
Mm-hmm.
again, the EWG, like you mentioned, has a great updated list on a regular basis if you're looking for paraben-free cosmetics and shampoos. And they actually, I just got an email. I'm gonna have to pre-order. They have like a holiday gift set where you get a whole box of EWG approved cosmetics and
Oh,
personal care.
wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, now this last one I think is going to be one also that some people are kind of like, oh, I've heard it before, but inflammation that is caused by diet.
Yeah. So inflammation is key. I mean, it's really the root of all evil. I mean, and the
Mhm,
thyroid itself is very, very, very sensitive to inflammation.
mhm,
So anything you can do to decrease inflammation is going to be better for your health in general and for your thyroid. So, like I mentioned, we can't avoid all these toxins because there's a ton of them, but we can help our bodies handle them better.
mhm,
There's a, try and limit your exposure, like we mentioned.
mhm.
Detox. So detox doesn't have to be as scary as it sounds. I mean, there's some pretty intensive detox regimens. There's 10-day, 14-day, 28-day. You name it, you can have a detox for it. But easy thing you can do on a daily basis is just sweat every day.
Right.
So get out there and exercise. If you have a sauna, great. But if you're getting some sort of sweat in, you're detoxing on a daily basis. So that's helping your body handle the toxins you're exposed to. Iodine and selenium, try and make sure those levels are in check if you can. Stress, we didn't talk too much about stress, but stress is inflammatory. So
Oh
if
my
you can
goodness.
try, and we can't get rid of all stress,
Yeah.
obviously,
Yeah.
but if you can try and manage it better, do things that help relax, things you enjoy doing. So that's
Mhm,
going to help your body handle these toxins and decrease the inflammatory foods. So
mhm.
um, our gut is really the gateway from the external environment to our internal environment. So if we eat less inflammatory foods, so inflammatory foods are gluten, pasteurized dairy, sugar, you're going to decrease your overall inflammation.
Definitely. And I did a bit of an experiment actually. So let me kind of go back and tell a little story. Last fall, October, November or so, I started having a lot of vertigo and
Oh my goodness.
neck pain. And it was very strange. And I didn't really understand. Initially, I didn't have the pain in my neck. I was just dizzy. And the neck pain then started to increase. And then I finally discovered that it was from a neck injury I had a decade ago from a car accident. And just
Oh,
unfortunately, with time and aging, nothing seems to really, over time improve, right? As we get older, things
man.
tend to have more issues. So I developed this vertigo, and it got to a point where I was really basically unable to work. Because I was so dizzy. It was hard for me to go to the grocery
Yeah.
store or drive. It was terrible. And I thought, okay, what do I need to do about this? I had, I'm sure in regenerative medicine, you're familiar with PRP injections,
Oh, yes.
platelet-rich plasma. So I went and had platelet-rich plasma injections into my neck in those areas where I was affected, and it made a tremendous difference. But it is pretty expensive to do that, and so I thought, what
Yeah.
can I do to support my body in this healing process with an anti-inflammatory diet? And what I did was a carnivore experiment. So in
Okay.
December of last year, I went fully carnivore. I've been keto probably about 5 years now. I've been keto off and on, but this time I decided, okay, I'm going to go full out carnivore because I had done a lot of reading And people in watching this podcast may be familiar with Jordan Peterson or Michaela Peterson, who both have dealt with a lot of inflammatory issues. Michaela had crippling arthritis. She had to have a hip replacement and an ankle replacement as a child due to rheumatoid arthritis. So I thought, wow, if she had improvement from a carnivore diet, maybe it would help with this neck healing. And
Mhm.
so I started that on December the 1st of last year, 2022. And by mid January, I was on a trip doing another video in Sarasota, Florida. So I improved between the carnivore diet and the injections. I improved enough to be able to go and film a video on location in
That's
mid January.
wonderful.
So, and I continued feeling better the longer I did it. And so I did it through, I would say I was pretty strict into June. And we went on a vacation, and then I kind of, came off of it while I was on our vacation. And I felt a difference. Went on that trip, I was like, I'm not feeling as good as I was feeling, because I had been feeling really amazing. But, and I also did an experiment here just the last few months with going off of it and being more, traditional in
Yeah.
my diet. And guess what? I'm
Mm.
having all kinds of inflammation. I'm actually going back to being full carnivore for a period of time here, coming up in the next few weeks. And I don't know that it's necessary for everyone who maybe wants to try it
Right.
to go fully carnivore, but to limit those inflammatory foods does make a tremendous difference. It did for me. And
Yeah, and everybody's sensitivities are a little bit different. So,
exactly. But what's great about it is if you do have a lot of sensitivities, it is a good way to figure out what you're sensitive to, because it is an elimination diet. You pull everything out
right.
that's inflammatory, and then you can add things back in one at a time. So that's a whole other video. But one plug I will give for the carnivore diet is I did find a snack that was really awesome for when I was
Okay.
traveling, called Carnivore Crisps. They are also an affiliate for this channel. They're like little meat chips, little steak or chicken or pork crisps, and they have nothing but meat and salt in them, and they're quite tasty. So
Oh,
so that's a great way to stay healthy when you're on the road, when you're traveling, and you're limited with your options. But anyone who wants to try carnivore crisps, check the link in the description. Give them a try.
traveling can always be a challenge when you're on a specific meal plan. So,
Yes, it absolutely is when you're on a budget or when you're on time constraints. And so that was one of the helpful things I took with me on my last trip, that was those carnivore crisps, having them in my bags. Okay, so we've covered all these endocrine disruptors. We've not really even began to scratch the surface, but these are the really important ones. You mentioned even more of them in your book, but the key takeaways that you mention are: keep your thyroid micronutrients optimal, drink filtered water, eat organic food when possible, limit plastics and synthetic antibacterial products. We didn't talk about that one today, but it's in
no.
your book. Avoiding nonstick cookware and switching to iron. I actually love my iron skillet. I cook with it every day. So, Dr. Mazza, thank you for sharing these actionable ways we can reduce our exposure to these toxins. And I am so excited now to kind of dive more into your book, Thyroid Talk, my personal experience with the book. I ordered it on the day it became available, and then it arrived on Tuesday of this week, and I finished reading it on Thursday.
Wow, you're good.
It was, well, I have to say, while it was very comprehensive and had a lot of really great information, it was not a struggle for me to read it. So for someone, the average layperson that's reading this book, it's not an overwhelming read.
Oh,
And so
good.
I'm really appreciative to you for writing this, because that's what I'm doing with my work, is trying to take things that are maybe sometimes hard for the average layperson to understand, and to distill it down into language that is just accessible to the average patient. So,
Well,
which you've done
yeah, and
really
you do a
well.
great job of that. So,
Oh, well,
thank
thank
you.
you. So, like I said, I read the book in just a couple of days. It was such a good read. Tell me
Oh,
why
good.
you decided to write this book. What is this book's origin story?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it kind of traces back probably almost 5 years ago because I'm I'm one endocrinologist. We run a small practice, and for the past 5 years, we weren't taking new patients, and for the past few years that we've only been taking new patients for RFAs and nodule
Right.
biopsies. But we get calls like every day, and we're turning patients away every day
Mm,
who need help. And my medical assistants and Jeff, our office manager, also my husband, these patients have really rough stories, and I
yeah.
know it's I feel bad for them. And again, only one person. Without seeing more patients in the office
Yeah.
on a face-to-face basis, how can I reach more people? How can I help them take steps towards a better health in their everyday life? And how can I help these people understand what's going on with their bodies and their health? And how can I help physicians create a better dialogue with their patients? Because there's a lot of patient dissatisfaction out there with their
Mhm.
physicians. And how can I help patients have the dialogue with their physicians? Because that's really the key. That's the key relationship there. So that really became kind of the beginning and the origin of the book as well as the podcast. That in turn led to the online master class.
Yes, I want to talk about that more in a minute too, because I think that is so important. You've written this book, and the book is comprehensive, but then there's also so much more. You could have
It's
written a
yeah,
book that's 10 times this thick and still not
right,
covered everything. But what you've done in creating this masterclass is you've added the things that when someone reads this book and says, I'm still hungry for more, they can come and
right.
find that information. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But I want to quote something from the foreword that you wrote that I thought was so great. It says, the purpose of this book is to help dedicated patients and compassionate health professionals get to the root causes of thyroid health symptoms and discover accurate diagnoses that are currently going under the radar, which that is so true. By offering research-based information and promoting integrative and effective treatments, I aim to provide healthcare providers with the strategies for proper diagnosis and treatment and empower patients with the tools they need to improve their health. My goal is to encourage patients and doctors to work together towards ending the suffering of people with thyroid disease and help them resume a fulfilling, healthy life. Wow, that is so just it gives me goosebumps.
Aw.
So first of all, I want to say why this statement resonates with me so much because what I do and what you do, the motivation behind your work, it's so similar to mine. I've
It
been
is.
doing patient advocacy for 4 years now, and I've seen firsthand the suffering that you mentioned. Patients are desperate; they want answers,
It really is.
and I want to help them get back to a fuller and better life. So my next question for you is, who is this book intended for?
I wrote this book for motivated patients who really don't want a magic pill because spoiler alert, there really is no magic pill.
Right.
There's lots of tools in our toolbox that are magic tricks that help out. But folks who want to put the work in, it's lifestyle, dietary changes,
Hmm.
who are motivated. But I also wrote this for open minded physicians who want to learn more because I think as physicians, maybe it's not so easy to admit that we didn't learn everything we need to know in medicine, in
Right.
medical school, and in residency. Medicine is a constantly evolving field. New things are happening every day,
Hmm.
and you can't keep up with everything.
Right.
But you can be open minded to know that what we learned 10 years ago doesn't hold as true now.
Right.
Because my ultimate goal is to help patients and doctors work together for just overall better thyroid health and have empowered patients and an improved overall medical profession. So I think it's a win-win.
I absolutely agree. And I think I'm going to give a copy of this to my doctor because she's open-minded and she's very supportive of my efforts with RFA, with my diet.
Uh,
So I think I'm going to send a copy of this to her.
it's available on Amazon. So we were so happy we had such a great response that it was a number one new release once it came out. It still is. So
I'm
we're
not surprised.
super psyched. Oh,
I
thank
also
you.
would like to add that you've made this book very affordable to the average consumer, which is just amazing.
Oh,
So thank you for doing that.
of
Uh,
course. I mean, if you can't afford it, then what good is it?
exactly. Something else amazing you've done, as you mentioned a second ago, is create, in conjunction with this book, a community focused on healthy thyroid called the Thyroid Transformation Course. So tell us more about that and how it complements the book and who that is for.
Sure, sure. Because and it is a lot of information, and though some people are going to want to read it again, and then some people are going to read it once and they say, "Okay, I got it," and they're going to run with it.
Yeah.
But some people are going to want more information, need more information,
Mhm.
or more in-depth kind of thyroid transformation. So that's really what the masterclass was made for.
Mhm.
There's different modules that kind of dig in on a deeper level, like is your thyroid in crisis, thyroid diagnosis, more in-depth lab evaluation, different scenarios with labs. What are your options for hypothyroidism? Because that's kind of the main thyroid issue we deal with when it comes to thyroid dysfunction. What are your treatment options? We really dig into how to heal your gut to heal your thyroid, because the gut is the key part of the whole um, thyroid issue, if
Mhm.
you ask me, an autoimmune triangle. Managing stress to heal your thyroid, because stress is a key thing, and our thyroid again is so sensitive to things,
Mhm.
and stress is a biggie. And then finally, putting it all together to heal your thyroid. You got to know how to do it. So
Mhm.
plus we have some bonus modules on Hashimoto thyroiditis, Graves' disease. We dig in deep to weight, hair, brain fog. We have some
Mhm.
thyroid friendly recipes, as well as discounts on supplements that I personally use and recommend to my patients. And I think kind of the big thing is we have monthly group access, so online question answer sessions once a month with me or one of my team members for 1 year. So rather than seeing me in the office, you see me
That's
over a
incredible.
webcam.
Excuse me. That's
So
incredible. Very excited about this. This is what you've done here is you have made this again accessible to people. And where I live, there are no endocrinologists that do what you're doing. In fact, there are very few even regular endocrinologists.
I know it's
So,
hard. There's just not a lot of us around to
yeah,
take care of everyone.
you've created something here that is so important for so many people. So the link to the masterclass is going to be in the description also below, and I am excited to participate in this when it comes out. So
Oh, thank you. And then
um,
the book has QR codes too, and there's a free
yeah.
webinar that you can anybody can look at.
So again, anyone interested in Dr. Mazza's podcast or the book or the masterclass, you can find all the links to those in the description below. Be sure to take advantage of these invaluable resources. Dr. Mazza, thank you so much for joining me today. I would like to end this episode by having you actually read something at the end of the book, The Ode to the Thyroid. This
Um,
is so great.
It's a poem by Jack Frost. The thyroid is such a funny thing wrapped inside your neck. I'm strong, I'm tough, I'm young and bold, so thyroid, what the heck? It won't stop me from doing well and living life in full. It's such a tiny little thing. Who says it had to rule? I don't see why I feel so cold, my fingers hurt like mad. I don't see why I feel fatigue. Why is it so bad? Why is it that I fall asleep at every given chance? The muscle cramps, the tired legs, the sickly looking stance. I would get help for all these things, but my memory lets me down. I'm going mad. It's just not fair. I forgot the way to town. My mind's a fuzz, my hair is thin, my nails are breaking fast. The lack of hair around my eyes gives everyone a laugh. Please, doctor, can you help me now, as I really feel so sad? You call me in and look away. You think I'm going mad. The tests are taken, all sent off. Now it's time to wait. At last there is a reason, something I can hate. Hate you very much I do for months of grief and strife. For all the days you made me bad, both my kids and wife. You will not win this battle now, as I have all the facts. But hell, it's hard to fight this thing and get myself on track. So all of you, both young and old, take heed and listen good. You can't ignore your body's voice, even if you could. Oh, fast things, slow down. You don't see what it is. Your thyroid's got you by the throat. Yes, yes, not mine, not his.
I love
Thank
that.
you.
And I think it just perfectly illustrates what it can be like to deal with a thyroid that doesn't
Filtration.
cooperate. So, thank you so much for sharing that in your book and reading it for us today. Thanks so much for listening. Please share this content and help others. If you need resources, testimonials, and support, please join our patient community. Save your thyroid. You can also find me on social media and Substack under the media handle It's Me Again. Never forget to educate yourself and be your own advocate and save your thyroid.